Hi, I'm Terry White for Havel Scissors, and our project is Yay, It's Spring! Yay, It's Spring is a simple design made up of very simple elements: paisleys, leaf shape, and these lozenges. It's all fused applique. Some of it is fused directly to the fabric, and some pieces are fused to felt for a dimensional look, and then the felt is glued to the background. There's minimal quilting in this design, and then we've got a really fun binding technique. These are the elements of the design for Yay, It's Spring. And I'm going to take fusible web, and I'm going to start with the little border design right here. And I like to use a pencil to trace it. Works really well. And so I'm going to trace exactly along the lines, or on the inside of the lines, or on the outside of the lines. One of the things that you'll find with this design is that nothing is computer generated, perfect, anything. These are all hand-drawn designs, and to me it makes it a little more lively. Okay, so you can see that I'm doing this. Now, I made this border design based on the other parts of the design here. See, this is actually a paisley. Here's part of the little lozenge, and here are the little circles right here. And that's how I designed this border. I take the fusible web and I press it to my fabric. Now the fabric is this brighter blue than the background, and I press it. When I'm cutting out a design with the curves, I like to use the really sharp curved scissors because it aids in cutting curves. Now, a lot of the techniques in this are quick, but when it comes to cutting, I like to be really careful. You don't want to saw with the scissors or pull the fabric. You want to cut. Now this may seem like it takes longer, and it does, but you'll get a better cut and you won't get fraying on your fabric. Okay, now I'm just going to do a little bit more cutting here. You see? Okay, now I always like to give it a little, before I start cutting, I give the paper a little bit of a pull. I call it a pre-pull, so that when it comes to pulling the paper off after everything's cut, I don't have that fiddly part. I can just pull it cleanly off. This is my bag of great scraps. See? This is where the little scraps from all my projects go, and I only save the great ones. Here are some scraps from my great scrap bag. Now, these particular scraps have the fusible web on the back already and the paper pulled off. These are leftovers from other projects, and these are gold when you already have the fusible on it. Oh, magic. I cut the little circle out from the center of this fabric. Okay, now I'm going to just hold these together, and I'm going to use the circle as a pattern to make my first paisley. The paisley designs are in the pattern, but this is just more of a free-form way of doing it. Okay, now what I want to say here is that I'm using the prints to my advantage. You see this? And I'm going from red to more of a yellow to a red, and then I'll end up with the orange. So if I go back and forth like that with the colors, and they have designs in them, I get a strong contrast in my paisley. You see? These are two fabrics that have been fused to a piece of wool felt. And this is going to give us our dimension. Now this is the little paisley, whoops, lost the circle. The little paisley that I cut out. And the final cutout will be with this fabric in the felt. But I want you to see the difference putting this little thing on the green and then putting the little design on this rose color fabric. Really different, aren't they? So what I'm going to go ahead and do, I like both of them, but I'm going to go ahead and press this to the rose because I like it. Now I like to use a hobby iron because it gets really hot and I can really control where the point goes. Very simple to use. Okay, so now my next step is to cut this paisley out. And so now this is a paisley. And see, I'm turning my scissors so that I can use the curve. And this is fun too because as you're working, you can change the dimensions of each paisley and make them any shape that you want. You know, any paisley shape that you want. Okay, so there. Now I have this dimensional piece. I use a color of felt that is similar in color to the very back piece that I'm using here. Now this one is a little more organic looking. I'm using very soft textured fabrics and there's not strong contrast, so I get a more organic look. And here I've got it positioned with an offcut from the fabric that was fused to the felt. So this is another kind of a look that you can do with the same project. So sometimes when I'm building a paisley, I start out, okay, I've got this little green circle and then I have this bright blue. And then I think, oh, I'll put it on this purple. And I get to this point and personally I think that's sort of hideous. So I can do a couple things. Because I haven't pressed them together, I can pull them apart and do them different things. But then sometimes I'm like, no, I want a challenge. So here's a fabric that has the turquoise in it, some purple and some green. And if you just set them all on there like that, that still looks really clunky to me. So what I did was it was the way I positioned the different paisleys, and then I cut the circle and created a little bit of a paisley on that. And I think this is a lot more interesting, and I still saved my original concept. So I've laid my shapes out onto my background fabric, and what I'm going to do is trace around each one of these shapes now with a permanent marker. And my first go around will be sort of rough, but then I take each one of these off and I put it on to another surface. Now I'll continue doing this, and the place I'm putting these shapes is so pretend that I've traced all around here. This is a piece of cardstock with a piece of felt glued to it. And so I can take the shapes off as I'm tracing them to save the positioning of things. Plus, they stick to this so that when I'm doing other things, it's not going to go anywhere. So I'm going to, after I just trace the general shape, I color this in with my, now this is a permanent marker, and after I let it dry and I press it, it's permanent. You can use a fabric marker if you like, or paint, anything that makes you happy. Here you've seen where I've colored in a very thick line, and that is where this is going to be positioned. So the colors that you decide to use are going to be important to the design because you'll see them later. Okay? Now, I'm going to take these back off and they go on my design board. Now the next thing I'm going to do is take my top fabric and I'm going to layer it with some batting. This is 100% cotton. It's called Legacy, and it's a really nice, firm, flat batting. And then this is my backing fabric. So before I glue these finally on, I'm going to quilt around just the drawings that I did on this top fabric, and I used a multicolor green for the center area, and then now my border, I went ahead and fused that to the edges without any felt, and when I quilted this, I quilted on the inside of the design and then twice on the outside. So it's got 1, 2, 3 lines of stitching, and I used a multicolor pale blue. And so this gives almost a cloud effect. After quilting, then I take my pieces that have been fused to the felt and I will lay them in the shapes, and I glue them. I use a good fabric glue, a nice tacky glue, so that they stay, and then I put a book on it so that it stays. Alright, so then the next thing that I do is I cut the edge all around. I use my rotary cutter, and so I end up with all the edges just unfinished. Well, the rest of this little quilt is not traditional, so why should the binding be? After I finished the quilting and the other parts of it, all I did was use my rotary cutter and I just cut the edges, and it's just completely ready to fray. So here's some more of my scraps that have the fusible web on the back. And what I'm doing is cutting these little pieces, and I'm just going to lay them along the edge. And once again, the little curve. Can't get enough of these little curves. So I can, just using the curve, I've got these shapes, which are just very fun. And I don't lay them perfect next to each other because that would be really, really boring. So here I'm going to get, see this shape like that. So I've got them laid against the edge on the top. And then this is a really great place for my little hobby iron. It's really hard to do this kind of thing with a big iron. You can also use little travel irons, but I find these very, very easy to work with. Okay, so I've fused them to the top, and see, I do a little row at a time, and then I'm going to turn them over, and well, I'm going to come from this side so that I don't burn myself, okay? And then just fold it one at a time. Now, I never said that this would go fast. I'm just saying it's a lot of fun. You can find full instructions and the pattern for this design on the website. This is Terry White for Havel Scissors.